right. So thank you everyone for joining us for another episode. I am here today with Robin Clare, who is another self-published author that I'm talking with. So Robin, thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah. So Robin, could you give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you came to even realize you wanted to write a book?
Okay. I'm laughing because I didn't. So I spent most of my first half of my career in corporate, and then I came out to launch a spiritual promotion company. And about 8 years in, I was asked to fulfill a request that I had done prior to my leaving corporate, which was I stood on my deck for almost a year asking the same question: how can I be of greater service to mankind? And about 8 years later, Yeshua, who many know as Jesus, came to me and asked me to write a book called Messiah Within, a guide to embracing your inner divinity. And I was like floored, first of all, that I got a message like this, first time ever. And second is I was not a writer, and I was not a channel, and I was not a Christian scholar or a Judaic scholar, depended upon which camp you're in with him, whether you think he was Jewish or Christian. I was none of those. And I didn't, in corporate, I wrote monthly management letters and,
Very different.
letters to clients, right? But I hadn't written anything. And so I was really very nervous. And I was guided to get a writing coach. And that was the best thing that I did, because that allowed me to have a accountability, which is what your program is all about, and to know that there was someone in my court that was cheering for me. And so I've written now 4 books, working on my 5th. But one of the things I also did was become a writing coach, because it was so important to me that having James Twyman, he was my writing coach, in my corner. Oh my gosh, it just, I don't know. I really understood what he did. I really understood, because for me, when I'm working with my clients, it's like I'm in their book with them, and they're trusting me with it, right? And I feel so responsible for it. And there's nothing like having a partner in life, in business, in your book, right? It's always nice to have partnership, right? So that's what I do. So I've written these books, all being guided from the Ascended Masters. And the last one that I wrote, or the one before the last, called Feast and Famine: Healing Addiction with Grace, was probably the most powerful experience for me. Would you like me to talk about that one?
Sure,
quickly?
definitely.
Okay. So this one, I was in a meditation, and I'm in the meditation, I'm in a waterfall, and all of a sudden I see this being of light come towards me, and I'm mesmerized, because it's a woman. I can see her, but her face keeps changing. She's like every woman, every age, every ethnicity. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I should really like ask how I can help this being of light that's standing there. And I finally came, I said, hello. And she said, hello, I am Sophia. And I'm like, I know who you are. So Sophia is a name that is for the divine feminine, like the partner to God, the goddess. And many people know her as the Holy Spirit, or in Judaism, the Shekhinah. And so I was mesmerized as she was standing there, right? And she said, it's my turn. I need you to write a book, Feast and Famine: Healing Addiction with Grace. And I want to talk about how to heal from addiction. How we feel in the spiritual realm is the answer to healing from addiction. But in the meantime, Robin, we also want you to talk about your addiction and your recovery. And the problem was, Tracy, was that I was still in addiction. And so I was in addiction from battling 40 years with obsessive compulsive food disorder and bulimia.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, I better write it anyway, because who am I to say no, right? So I wrote the book. She channeled with me. I wrote what she wanted. It's a very powerful book. But when I got to the end, I was like, well, I hope these teachings work for you. They didn't work for me because I was
Oh,
still in addiction. And so I had to put the book down. I couldn't publish it until I was able to come into recovery, which I did within the year. I had a very, very serious problem with one of my bouts of bulimia where I started bleeding and I could feel like I was dying. And so it was almost like, I'm never going to do this again. Not
mm,
almost like, it was like, I will never do this again. And that's one of the concepts in the book is, so this was the name, so if your people can see it, Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace. The idea is that what we're addicted to is suffering.
mm,
And then we pick our poison or our vice or our habit to make us feel better. So yes, we can be addicted on a secondary level to any one of those vices. But what our true addiction is to suffering because we haven't healed the traumas of our past. And so this book is about healing the trauma in your life. And so because I hadn't healed the trauma in my life enough to move to recovery, I couldn't write the ending until I could. And so then I picked the book up again and I rewrote it. And boy, what a difference between writing it from active addiction and writing it from recovery. But I will say this, and this is what I say to my clients. When you write your life recovery story, remember recovery from trauma,
mhm.
which is what most people write about if it's a self-help book, you heal yourself. So even if you're not fully healed, write it anyway, because that writing process is so healing. And so I always say, when you write your recovery life story, you heal yourself. When you share it, you heal others.
Mm,
And
it's
so
powerful.
yes, because when you then share it and you put it out in the world, it doesn't matter if 1,000 people have read it or 10, right?
Yep.
Or just even your family, even if your family was to read what you wrote and now knows you better, that's a blessing in itself, right?
Right.
But I
Yeah.
will say to your clients and your students, writing is very healing. And so what I did is I also created this journal called the Right Recovery,
Okay.
and for people to use writing as a recovery tool.
Oh, that's a great
And
idea.
yeah, so I think that this idea that what we're suffering, that we're addicted to is suffering, then brought me to my podcast, Hungry for Answers. Isn't that perfect
Oh,
for
that is
eating
perfect.
disorders? But it's really not about eating disorders. It was just a perfect answer, perfect name for me because I struggled with eating.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so then to Hungry for Answers, and then as I said, I do the writing coaching now, and wrote another book after that, which was actually an ebook and meditations called King Solomon Speaks. Obviously, he was next in line, and and now I'm working on a book that is not coming from any one specific ascended master, but it's in a very advanced spiritual book that I'm writing in the most simple way that I can, because I believe that my superpower is to be able to take complex language or complex concepts and bring them down to a level that people can understand. And again, that's what I do with my clients, because sometimes people write to be the smartest person, and that's not always the most effective person.
Right.
You
Right.
want to write, I always write to my mother. I always write for my mother. And my mother is very smart, but my mother always looks at me, like I have two heads with what I do. And so I figured if I can write my book and my mother understands it, my cousin was cute. She said, this Feast and Famine, she goes, they should put this like in spirituality for dummies or something, right? Like the way that she goes, I understood every word in this book and I thought I wasn't going to understand anything. Right. So that's another piece of advice for your people. Write as simply as you can for two reasons. One, you want people to really understand it, but two, the majority of people only read at an 8th grade level.
Yeah,
So
great advice.
yeah, so you want to do that.
Yeah. So when you went through, and this could be your first book or any other book after that, as far as the process to move to publication, like as far as
Yes.
editing and creating the design for your covers, did
Mhm.
your coach help you with that? Was there a certain process or any tips or advice you might give in going
Yeah.
about doing that?
So I have not published any one book the same.
Okay.
They're all been self-published. Well, self-published with maybe what we want to really call it is not self-publishing, but hybrid publishing.
Okay.
And that's in between self-publishing and having a publisher. So hybrid publishing is when you work with a boutique press and they so you pay to play, but they become like your partner on the publishing. And so you give them a manuscript, they edit it, they help you design a cover,
Nice.
they put everything into Amazon and all these other places, Walmart and Barnes and Noble, wherever it's going, right? And usually they help you with marketing and maybe a bestseller campaign. Um, and you pay more upfront. I actually work for a boutique publishing company as a writing coach,
Okay.
and I like that model the best. I went with a big self-publisher, and I felt very lost. Every time I turned around, there was somebody else on my book, like in charge
Oh,
of a different part, and then something went wrong, and I didn't know who was in charge of my book.
okay.
So that was with Messiah Within, my first book, and I vowed that I would never go with that's a big organization again.
Yeah.
That I would find, good boutique presses. And so I think I've finally landed at one that I really like.
Okay. So how would you recommend if somebody's looking for a boutique press to help them to publish? What are some of the things maybe to look for to make sure it is a right fit
Uh,
for them?
yeah. So you want to meet with them.
Hmm.
You want to understand what they're offering. And yes, this goes back to the conversation you and I were having before we were live about doing, it's a project.
Hmm.
You have to recognize that publishing your book is a project. And so you should do an Excel sheet, or if you do Excel, or even just a pad with lines, and look at least 3 or 4 boutique presses and see what they offer and see what they don't offer and compare and contrast.
Hmm.
And then also trust your intuition, because you're going to meet these folks and you're going to be like, I feel really good about this. And I feel really good about what they're going to do after, after this is
Right.
over. And, I think that that's the hardest part, is when after it's out there, because everyone expects their book to be successful, but most likely it's not going, we're not Neil Donald Walsh or Danielle Steele, right?
We're not writing our
But
books to make tons of money.
well,
Right.
but we could be writing our books as to launch a program like the
Correct.
other things that you're teaching,
Yep.
as well as to launch a public speaking. So you need to think of your book as a tool as a calling card for the rest of your business.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
very true.
Mm.
So I have one more question before we move to wrap
Yes.
up, and that is, when you were writing, and this could have been any of the books that you were working on, and you had a lack of motivation, a lack of inspiration, how did you get through those times? What are the things that helped you to bridge that gap and start
Yeah.
writing again?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say this about it. When you make the commitment to write your book honestly becomes your life, right? Because it has, the book is an energetic being just like you are. And right. And so when you commit to this book, you have to really commit to it. So I would say put a time on your calendar every day to write. Now, some days you won't get there. I put 8 to 9 o'clock to write every day. And some days it doesn't happen. Some days I'm there till 10 a.m. Sometimes I just write the name of the next chapter. I don't know what's going to happen on that day. I don't know if my elderly parents are going to call me, right?
Right.
But that commitment is first and foremost what's required.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't commit to the process, it's okay. It will come.
Yeah.
If there's a desire and you're willing and you're doing it first and foremost from a place of service, right? If you're writing a book, one of the things that my spiritual guidance always said to me is that success is measured by impact, and impact is rewarded with abundance. And then you decide what abundance looks like, right? So if you want to make an impact with your book, you have to first make the commitment, and then you have to know that it will take time. And if you get writer's block, get up and dance. That's what I do, actually. I get up and dance, and I try not to do other things, like sometimes I might clean the bathroom, like figured eventually I'm going to want to get it back to the book versus cleaning, right? But you need to just stop the presses, right, in your head, right? Go outside for a walk, because when you have writer's block, it's typically because you're writing from your head instead of your heart. When I would write with Yeshua for Messiah Within, what he would say to me is that I must write from the heart. And if I wasn't writing from the heart, what he would say to me is, "We are complete for today, Robin, carry on."
Oh.
And I'd be like, ruh-roh. Oops. But what was the difference? If I was writing from my heart, the words would flow out onto the page. If I was writing from my head, I'd be writing and being like, oh my God, who would want to read this? This is boring. And it's my life. And I think it's boring. Like there's like that self-talk that's going on while I'm writing. And so when you can drop into your body and write from there versus from your head. Now people are saying, well, how do I get the words, right? The words are in your heart, especially if it's a self-help book. The words are in here. You got to pull them out from your heart, because those are the ones that are filled with love and empathy and compassion, and the words that your readers will most resonate with.
Yeah. I love that. I think sometimes too, people get so hyper focused on, if they're wanting to write a book, that I have to sit here, I have to crank something out, it has to be good. That perfectionist mindset starts to, and then the imposter syndrome starts to creep in. So I definitely agree with you too about being able to get up, take a break, do something completely different. I like your dance, scrub the tub, whatever you need to do before you get back.
And in my world, in my spiritual world, there's something that we have called divine timing. And what that means is that there is a plan for your book, for your manuscript. And we may think it's like 3 months from today, because that's the date that I said it had to be done. But that's not maybe what's intended by the universe. You may not even have met the people that you may not, when you agree to write your book and to allow yourself to be guided from your own heart, from your own inner divinity, there's always more. There's always more. Here's a good example. When I wrote Messiah Within, it was 12 steps. When I received the steps to write, I realized that I only lived 10 of the 12. And so I had to wait to live the other 2. So you can imagine, oh, is this step 11? No, And I realized that step 11 and 12 came with the same spiritual 2x4 that steps 1 through 10 came. When it came. But if I was in any rush to write that book, it took 2 years for those last 2 steps to come.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And here I
Yes.
was, all right, I'll sit down and I'll be done in 4 months. No, not really. So even though I have a different writing partner than most people do, I
Mm-hmm.
still think it applies to everybody. Take your time and do the very best that you can, and allow the universe to help you to receive the words through your own heart center that will have the most impact on your reader.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. So Robin, we do have to wrap
Yes.
up.
Yes,
If
yes.
whoever is listening to this at any point in time wants to get in contact with you
Sure.
or connect or follow, can you let everyone know how they go about doing that?
Sure. My website is clarity.com, based on my last name, and that's CLARE-ITY.com, or at Instagram, Clarity by Robin, and Facebook, Clarity with Robin.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robin. I appreciate your time
Welcome.
and
Yeah,
the
thank
information
you
that
for
you've
having me.
shared. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode.